Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This week's video we're going to be talking about 4 turkey hunting tips and tricks that are going to make you a better turkey hunter this spring. So in this week's video, we're going to be talking about the 4 turkey hunting tips and tricks that I like to use that are going to increase your chances of being more successful come this spring. This video is going to be catered to the people who are just now getting into turkey hunting. If you are a seasoned turkey hunter and you happen to watch this video, please make sure to leave a comment if you feel that there's anything that I should have elaborated a little bit more on, or if there's something that I just completely missed. We want to make sure that we're helping these newbies be as successful as they possibly can this spring. So tip number 1, let's get started with that. And this is probably going to be the most important one. And this one is going to help ensure that you stay legal when out in the field this spring. And it's how to properly identify a turkey. And when I say properly identify a turkey, I'm talking about males versus females. In the spring, especially here in Michigan, you're only eligible to hunt a male turkey. Females are completely off limits. Properly identifying a turkey is going to be extremely critical for you to ensure that you stay legal during your hunt. The last thing that you want to do is shoot a hen. So the technique that I use out in the field to identify a male versus a female is the color of their head. That's going to be the biggest giveaway for me and the biggest indicator versus a male turkey and a female turkey. And when you're looking at a male turkey versus a female turkey, the color difference that they have on their head is drastically different. A male turkey is going to have bright red, light blue cheek patches, very colorful feathers. They're going to be bigger in size when compared to a hen. And a hen is actually going to have a grayish blue head, and then their feathers are going to lack a lot of those, a lot of the colorful feathers. They're going to be more of like a rustic brown. So pay attention to that. That one tip that I gave you is the color of their head. Like I said, that's the main indicator. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is all male turkeys will have a beard. It's very rare, but some hens do have beards, and if they do, they are eligible for you to take during a spring turkey hunt. But like I said, it's very, very low probability that you'd see a hen out there with a beard. But telling the difference between a Jake and a mature turkey really is to kind of, again, pay attention to that beard length. A Jake is going to have a pretty short stubby beard. I'm going to say it's probably going to be anywhere from 1 inch to 5 inches long, where compared to a mature tom, it's going to have a beard length anywhere from, I'd say, from 7 inches down to 10 inches, and could possibly be even longer. Some turkeys have multiple beards. It's just based on, you know, what you run into and how that beard grows on that particular tom. Now keep in mind that beard length is not a solid indicator of a turkey's age. However, it is going to be a great way to identify a Jake versus a tom. So tip number 2 is going to be where to locate a turkey. And I'm going to break this down in 3 different segments, and the segments are going to be the roost, a staging area, and a feeding area. When looking for a roost site, you're going to want to look for an area that has a lot of heavy timber trees. You're going to want to look for areas that have a lot of conifers, pine trees. Both of those types of trees offer turkeys the ability to get out of the wind and also stay a little warmer on those very, very cold days. Also, what you want to look for is an area that is close in proximity to water. Turkeys need water just as much as any other animal, so that's going to be very critical for their survival. The next thing that you want to look for when picking out a turkey spot is you want to look for an open field. And the reason that I say this is because the turkeys don't fly like normal birds do, like you would, like you'd see a hawk. They actually kind of just swoop down, so they actually need an open area to land into, and I would say that open area has got to be somewhere within 50 to 70 yards from that roost tree. If you can find those 3 things, big timbers, conifers, an open area, and close in proximity to water, you're going to have a very good chance of finding the roost of the turkey. Now keep in mind, when setting up to hunt, you do not want to hunt right under the roost tree, because either A, you're going to spook them out of there when you're going in, either that or they're just going to come out and they're going to soar, like I said, 50 to 70 yards, and then they're going to be well ahead of you. And then when you go to get into position, most likely they'll see you coming well in advance, and you'll blow them out of there. So you want to get in between that open area if possible. Either that, or you want to hunt that staging area where those turkeys are going to be. And kind of moving into that, the staging area is exactly what it sounds like. They're staging, they're displaying themselves, and this is when a turkey actually struts. And I'll link a video in that will give you a good idea of what that looks like when a turkey is strutting in a staging area. And you can see that they puff up, they fan out their feathers, they tuck their head down really low, and they strut. And the reason that they're doing this is they're actually displaying dominance, and then they're also trying to win over a female for a mate. The next area is going to be a feeding area, and before you start to look for feeding areas, you really need to understand what it is that turkeys eat on a regular basis. And turkeys will eat just about anything, so but I've always had great success in fields that have grains, so any clear-cut corn, fields that have a variety of green vegetation, and then also don't overlook those hardwood spots where you know there's a lot of oaks that have dropped acorns. They'll also eat grubs, different shrubs, and then if you have berries in the area, those are also going to be a great food source for them as well. But for me, I've always hunted over typically a clear-cut cornfield, because or a field with vegetation, an open field, because it kind of serves two purposes. It serves as the staging area, and it serves as a feeding area. So if you can find that type of area, there's a good chance that those turkeys will hang out in that field for a good portion of the day, displaying themselves, then feeding, and kind of going back and displaying themselves. So tip number 3, tips and tricks. Here in this portion of the video, we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're going to be talking about the calls, that the variety of calls that you have the option to choose from. We're going to be talking about camo, and then we're going to be talking about what type of weapon you want to use. I'm first going to start with calls, and I have a couple calls set out over here, and I'm just going to kind of quickly go through them and then kind of just quickly demonstrate how these calls works. So I highly recommend this type of call for any type of beginner. The reason that I recommend this type of call is it's very consistent. One of the problems that I had as a very inexperienced turkey hunter was inconsistency with calling, and that's when I shifted over to a trigger call. I got more consistent, and I had better responses from turkeys. I've actually called multiple turkeys in with this. So this is a great type of call. Like I said, it's a trigger finger. It's made by Quaker Boy. It's like a box call. I picked it up from Cabela's, but it's very, very repeatable. So here we go. I'll give you an example of it. So like I said, very, very repeatable call, very nice call. I'd recommend it for any type of beginner. So the next type of call that I want to talk about is a slate call. This is probably one of your most common calls. They make a variety of these as far as price range goes. You kind of just want to play around with some calls and pick which one you feel that you are most consistent with. What I've really found out over the years is that I'm definitely more consistent when I have a wood peg or a wood scratcher on a slate call. I've had some calls in the past that have had plastic scratchers on the end, and I've never been very consistent with it. So when I switched over to this call, I had a lot more luck. But what I like about this one is you can, depending on the amount of pressure you put on the call, will dictate how loud that call is. So here we go. I'll just give you an example. And you can tell that the sound of this call is different from that call. So depending on the turkey, certain turkeys will respond to different calls and different sounds. So that's why you kind of want to carry around a variety of them. If you wanted to, you could do a purr on this. And then mix it up a little bit, do a purr. So pretty easy to use. My recommendation to anyone that is new to turkey hunting is definitely make sure that you practice your calls before going out in the field. That's another really big mistake that I didn't take into consideration when I was new to turkey hunting. I wouldn't practice my calls. I just went out there and kind of winged it, and I had more failures than I did success. So the next type of call that I want to talk about is another very standard one that you typically see turkey hunters carrying quite a bit, is just a box call. So what's really good about a box call is they're very loud. They project the sound a very long distance. So if you got some birds that are very far away, you can sound off on a box call, and they're gonna have a really good time hearing that. Same thing with any other call. You want to practice it. If you notice that you are doing a really good job at making calls and your calls are very consistent, and then all of a sudden they start to drop off, especially on your wood ones, you may need to reapply some chalk on them. So like I said, if you've done really well with your calls and then you get some inconsistency, like I said, maybe reapply some of that chalk and it'll kind of bring that tone back to you. So again, very easy. You're just going to brush this up against this wood. Depending on the type of pressure is going to dictate the type of pitch of the sound that you're going to get. But again, you just want to play around with it. I don't typically use these calls that much. This is not one that I carry out in the woods with me often, so I'm a little rusty on it, but we'll give it a quick demonstration here. And then so you can tell that the pitch of this is much louder than some of the other type of turkey calls that we just went through. The next type of call that I have is more of a custom turkey call. This isn't one that I see people carry too often. I was actually gifted this call. It was made by a guy out in Tennessee, I believe, but I was actually gifted this by my mother-in-law. This is a turkey call that probably is going to take a little bit more practice. I'm not even super proficient with it, but when I get in a groove, I can make some pretty sexy sounds with it. So we'll give it a quick try. But you can tell, I mean, I'm a little rusty with it. I haven't practiced with it too much, and it probably needs some chalk added to that. But you can tell, again, another different style of box call. It produces a louder pitch, is going to carry that sound out quite a bit. Next, we're going to shift into the type of camo that you should be wearing out in the field. So this is really going to depend on the type of area that you're hunting in. In southeastern Michigan, we have a lot of timber, a lot of hard timber. So typically I'm wearing like a traditional real tree camo, or I'm wearing my favorite, which is Ridge Reaper Forest camo. And I had great luck kind of mixing and matching last year. So I ran with a real tree pants, and then I ran with a Ridge Reaper Forest top. So this is typically my go-to turkey hunting hat. It doesn't look the coolest, but what I really like about it is it does a great job at kind of hiding the eyes, especially when you throw up a face mask. So keep that in mind too. Turkey have great eyesight, and they can see a very long distance, and they can also see color. So if your face is just completely exposed, especially if you don't have any facial hair, turkeys are going to have a pretty good chance of picking you off before you can get within range. So like I mentioned, turkeys have very good eyes, so make sure you leave the blaze orange at home. For you beginner turkey hunters, blaze orange is not a requirement. It's the only hunting season that involves a firearm that you don't have to wear blaze orange in, because of the fact that turkeys do see color. As I mentioned, turkeys have great eyesight. They can see all the way out to I believe roughly 2 miles, and they'll pick off your movement very quickly. So to make sure that you're putting something in front of you when setting up on a bird, you can either use a half blind, which I started using recently. It pops up very quickly. It's small, it's compact, and it's just enough to hide your movement when you're making calls or getting ready to take the shot. Your other option is just some type of natural brush. If you got a fallen down tree, use that to your advantage. If you have a bush that you can get behind but still give yourself a good shot if a turkey comes in, that's obviously going to be a great advantage. And then anything that's going to really help break out your outline and hide your movement from those turkeys is really going to be very critical for you. The next thing that I want to discuss is the type of gun that you're going to use. For me personally, I only use my 870 Express 12 gauge shotgun. I use a smooth barrel with a full choke on the end, and then I run a turkey load. Last year I ran the Winchester Longbeards. This is a 5-shot. It's a 3-inch shell. I had great success with these. Make sure that you pattern your shotgun before you go out in the field. And what I mean by this is get a turkey target or get some type of a target. Well, I prefer the shoot and see targets, but place that out at 20, 30, 40, 50 yards and see where your pattern is, and that's going to give you an idea of your most effective range. Me personally, I really don't want to shoot at anything that's 50 yards and out, just due to the fact that I want to preserve that breast meat as much as I can. Ideally with turkey, you want them in close so you can take a headshot, and like I said, preserve that premium meat, which is all coming right off of the breast. So if you pepper that meat, obviously you're going to be picking out BBs when you're processing the turkey, and then you're going to have to be extremely careful when you start eating the turkey to make sure that you're not chewing on any leftover BBs that you didn't get. Your other option here in Michigan, at least, and I believe most states this is true, you can also hunt turkeys with a bow. I have personally never done it, so I can't give you a ton of information on that just because I don't have the experience. The one tip I will give you is don't go out turkey hunting with the same broadhead that you'd go out and deer hunt with. They do make specific turkey broadheads that you want to get, and again, just like a shotgun with patterning, you want to make sure that you shoot that just to make sure it's flying true before you go out in the field. So tip number 4, we're going to be talking about how to e-scout for a turkey spot. E-scouting is just looking on Google Maps or Onyx Maps for an area that you think is going to be a good prime location to get set up on a turkey. And the reason I bring this up is because not everybody has the time to go out and do preseason scouting and get boots on the ground. I know a lot of people have work obligations, school obligation, family obligations. Obviously the best thing to do is to get boots on the ground, but again, if you don't, let's talk about some e-scouting, and let's talk about how to identify an area from Google Maps and Onyx Maps that's going to be a good potential turkey hunt. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift over to the computer, and I'm going to share my screen with you guys and show you exactly what to look for.
Okay everyone, so we have jumped over to Onyx Maps to do our e-scouting segment. I do want to quickly mention that I am not sponsored by Onyx. This is just a tool that I use very frequently when doing my e-scouting, and then also when I am out in the woods. What I like about Onyx is it gives you the ability to mark waypoints to areas that you want to potentially visit or areas that you've already visited and that you want to return to. Either way, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to dissect this potential turkey hunting property. So when I start my e-scouting, I always like to start in the topographic map setting because it gives me an idea of the terrain that I'm going to encounter when I get there. It also makes it very easy to identify water sources. You can see that we have a big body of water here feeding into a swampy marsh, and then we also have another body of water here feeding into this creek, and then we also have this big river also again feeding into a smaller creek. So we have lots of water in the area. So now that I've identified the features of this property, I'm going to go ahead and shift over to my hybrid view. And the reason why I like the hybrid view is because it keeps the topographic map lines. Now, if you don't like topographic maps, you can always switch over to the satellite view and you can completely get rid of them. But for this segment, we're going to go ahead and keep them on. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, there was 3 things that I mentioned that you want to look for when looking for a turkey hunting spot, and it was an area that was in close proximity to water, which we have plenty of that with this big body here feeding into this swampy marsh. We have another big body of water here feeding into that creek, and then we have this big river system feeding into another creek right in this valley. The next thing that I mentioned was timber, which we have plenty of timber here, and then I also mentioned looking for conifers, which give turkeys the ability to get out of the wind and also stay warm on those cold days. And when looking at this area, I'm starting to focus in on these different shades of green, specifically these darker shades here. You also have some over here. You have some in this area over in here. So that's leading me to believe that you have some conifers in the area that kind of transition into harder woods or hardwoods. The next thing that I mentioned was having open fields or open areas that serve as staging areas or feeding areas. So when looking at this map and looking at this piece of property, this is a very ideal turkey spot. Now we're going to talk about how I would try to dissect and hunt this piece of property. So you can see the access point is here. For some reason, I'm starting to gravitate towards this backfield over here. And the reason that I'm doing so is because of that water source that ran here, right through this valley. And then with this slight elevation change, you can see that you have a high point here, you have a high point over here. This is going to be a bench or a flat spot through these hardwoods, and then it's going to kind of roll off onto this slight elevation change. It's not huge, but it is a slight elevation change nonetheless. So based on the fact that I have water here, I have a high point with the elevation change, and then this open field, I would bet that you'd have a very good chance to see turkeys in this area. If I were to hunt this spot, what I would want to do is obviously access this property from here, get here early in the morning, probably an hour before sunup, and then work my way back into this area. If there are turkeys roosting in this area, I would either try to hunt these hardwoods and potentially intercept them coming into this field. Either that, or I would want to hunt somewhere along the edge of this field and try to call that turkey into some decoys using a calling strategy. Now, another bonus tip that I want to give you is when you access an area well before sunup, you can utilize crow calls or owl calls to help locate turkeys. When sounding off on a crow call or an owl call, turkeys, for whatever reason, automatically respond to those calls. So once you hear that turkey sound off, then you can move in and have a better idea of their general location. Again, if you hear a turkey, you don't want to set up right under him. You want to figure out the best approach to try to intercept him going into a feeding site or a staging area. This is a tactic that I used last year. I found a piece of public land that was very similar to this. It was close in proximity to water, it had lots of timber that surrounded a big field like this. I had never stepped foot on that property. Again, e-scouted it, went to that property, and ended up killing a bird within the first hour. So this is definitely a good way to look for a potential turkey hunting spot if you do not have the ability to get out and do some preseason scouting. If you do have some time to do preseason scouting, I would recommend still using onX to e-scout the area first to see if it potentially lays up well for turkey. If it does, then you can go to this area and you can mark waypoints of where you're finding the roosts at. When you find an area that is a potential roost site, most likely you're going to see a lot of turkey droppings, you're going to see feathers on the ground. That's a solid indicator that turkeys are using that area to roost, and then from there you can start to pinpoint where you'd want to set up to intercept those birds. I hope this e-scouting segment has helped. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment below and I'll be happy to answer.
Everyone, so we are back down in the man cave, and that is going to wrap up our video today. As I mentioned, those are the 4 turkey hunting tips and tricks that I wish I would have known about when I was a beginning turkey hunter. I hope that you guys have found this video educational, and I hope that this video helps you come this spring when you're out doing your turkey hunt. If so, if you've watched this video and you do happen to get successful, please come back, leave me a comment, let me know how these tips and tricks helped you. We greatly appreciate the support. If you guys haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and do so, and then make sure you hit that bell notification so you guys are notified next time that we put out another outdoor adventure. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.